heard rumors about my boss's Johnson size and became obsessed with it until my husband found out. I'm here to confess my crime. I became obsessed with the size of my boss's Johnson, and I became obsessed with it. Who in the world becomes obsessed with their boss's junk? Me, that's who. And because of this, I had lost my job, my husband, my friends, and family. It hadn't really started out like this. I was the perfect and loving wife to my husband and the perfect example to my 2 kids. How did it come to this? I never thought it would come to this. Looking back, it all started innocently enough. Just a simple rumor that I had overheard in the break room at work. Little did I know that it would ignite a flame inside me, leading me down the treacherous path of obsession and ultimately putting my marriage at stake. My name is Emily, and I'm 27 years old, and I have been married to my loving husband Ethan for 5 blissful years. We even have 2 perfect children together, Nolan and Nora. But my husband had taken them away from me as his act of revenge. What had I been thinking? I had the perfect life together with my husband and my 2 children, or so I thought. Ethan had always been supportive, caring, and always put our relationship first, although it had been bordering on too much. And what had I done to thank him? I had gone to start off a fling with my boss because I was obsessed over rumors of my boss's Johnson size. My husband and I had built a solid foundation based on trust and understanding, and we tried to imbibe that in our children. Now I don't even know how I could salvage that. The divorce between me and my husband had been messy, and he had taken full custody over my children. Help, Redditors. I really don't know how to fix this. I had met my husband in high school. Our love and union had been since back in the days. It all began in the hallways of our high school, where you could forge friendships, build relationships, and gain enemies. In my case, I had gained a friend who I was going to end up marrying, but I hadn't known that yet. I had been a shy and introverted teenager. I hadn't liked going to school, and it didn't help that each new school I went to, my parents would get transferred and I would have to start all over again. I didn't have any social life or cues because I didn't make any friends. There had been no point in making friends if I was going to disappear by the end of the school semester. It was because of this I hadn't quite known how to navigate the complexities of my teenage years. I had been a rebel to my parents and skipped school on the days I couldn't get away with it. On the day I had met Ethan, my father had caught me trying to sneak back into the house after I had told him and my mom that I was off to school, LOL. Because of that, I was carried to my dad's car and marched off to school with my dad behind my back, looming over me in case I decided to make a run for it. But little did I know that my life was about to change forever when I met the person who would become my husband. He had been the straight-A student my principal had hired to show me around the school. I had evaded him because I couldn't bring myself to be social or even know what to even say. My husband, well, he had been my friend first, was the epitome of confidence and charm. There was something magnetic about him that drew people in, and I wasn't left out. I had found myself gravitating towards him whenever he was around. I know this may sound cliche, but after avoiding him and the principal, I ran into him in the middle of the cafeteria, and I had spilled my yogurt over him. Typical romance story, right? Well, that was how I and Ethan became friends. As the weeks turned into months, our friendship grew stronger. We spent hours talking, laughing, and getting to know each other. Ethan and I had a shared love of music and always talked about our dreams to explore the world and satisfy our adventure streak. I dare say Ethan and I had connected on a deep level in high school. He became my confidant, my best friend, and the person I could always rely on. Unfortunately, I had to leave the school once again as my dad was transferred, and I never in my wildest dreams thought that Ethan would make his way back into my life and we would get married. Well, high school passed by in a blur for me and I got admitted into the University of Connecticut. That was where I had met Ethan again, LOL. He had been studying computer engineering and I was majoring in education and literature. I wanted to be an author and make my name known around the world. That was what I wanted. Ethan and I began hanging out more often. He would always bring me nice things and was always so intentional about me. He paid special attention to my needs and did things without me asking. What human wouldn't fall for that? I fell and fumbled it big time, though. I had been so stupid. Well, Ethan asked me to be his girlfriend by the time we were in our 3rd year of college, and we dated for 2 years. In that time, Ethan had graduated, gone on to do his master's degree, and began a startup tech company. Meanwhile, I had also graduated and gone on to work in a publishing company as a junior editor. On the night of our 2-year anniversary, Ethan proposed to me, and that was how we became married. I loved him, and our relationship had been built on friendship right from the beginning. Most girls would kill for that kind of love, am I right? What I didn't know was that it would get boring for me and prompt me to look somewhere else and become obsessed with that someone else. Ethan and I's wedding had just been a close and intimate gathering of those that had known us through the years. We had just been fresh off college. We didn't have much to spend on a lavish wedding, although I wanted one. By our 3rd year of marriage, I had popped out 2 babies from my belly, my twins Nolan and Nora. Everything was going smoothly. I feared it became too much. My husband took me out on dates, got me stuffs, gave me money even though I had been working, but I guess it all just became too much for me. Like I said, my husband was very intentional towards me. But as I grew over the years, it started to feel like he could do anything for me, and that made me grossed out and start casting my eyes elsewhere. After I had my babies, I just didn't know what I wanted anymore, but I could guarantee that my husband wasn't it. This was how my problems in my marriage started. Well, not actually how it started. I had been the cause of the problems in my marriage. I started picking fights with Ethan whenever he did something that I didn't like, and he would always retaliate by trying to do something nice. He literally gave me anything I could ever have asked for, so what had been my problem? Well, back to the reasons why problems started coming up in our marriage. Firstly, it had begun from money issues. I had gotten to know that Ethan had asked my father for a loan to expand another business he had wanted to start up. Can you imagine your husband asking your father for a loan? Like, how low could he go? I wouldn't have had a problem with it, if I wasn't married to him, of course. LOL, I'm kidding. I wouldn't have had a problem with it if my stepmother hadn't called me to gloat in my face that I had married a good-for-nothing who couldn't provide for me but had to resort to asking my dad for money. I had been so livid after that call because that meant that she had already spread the news around town that my husband was calling her husband and begging for money. Did you know how bad that looked on me? No, I wasn't a prideful person. Okay, maybe I was a little bit. But if you had been in my shoes, wouldn't that have made you hang your head in shame? He could have borrowed from the bank for actual sake. Why had he gone through my dad? When my husband had gotten back from work that evening AM, I had confronted him about it, and he had literally said he saw nothing wrong in asking for financial assistance from my dad. Could you even comprehend that? He saw nothing wrong in not having a little shame. I warned him that he shouldn't do it again, and if he wanted someone to loan him money, that those were what the banks were for. I couldn't stand the shame of my stepmother floating in my face, and that had started the rift in our marriage. Not exactly in our marriage, the rift in my eyes over my husband. This had been one of the pushing factors that had made me become less inclined towards my husband that was meant to be my best friend. After my dad and stepmom incident and the borrowing of money, which I had made sure my husband paid back in full, and I even had to add some extra from my savings to save face LOL. After that fiasco, another problem arose. Ethan was behind on the bills. My husband had been stacking up bills that had been due for payment like 2 months back. I had noticed that he was struggling with funds when I had asked for some money to go back to school shopping for our 2 kids, and he had said he would rally up some funds. Like, what in the world did that mean? I had not taken it to be anything. I had thought maybe he just had to tie up some loose ends and he would give me the money soon. But this man had been lying to me. We were low on funds, and I discovered the drawer full of bills he had stacked and hidden when I was cleaning up the house on my free workday. The water bills, the heater, our mortgage, our freaking mortgage. We stood the chance to be evicted, and my husband had kept quiet about it. When he had gotten back from work again, I had confronted him about it, and he said he was running low on funds because he was trying to put money into the new business, and I should bear with him. Who the hell cared? In my head, I had been like, so my children and I should starve or be evicted from our home because you were trying to start up a new business. Did he not have any sympathy for us? I think at this point I had just been escalating everything because I had already begun to find everything my husband did quite irritating, and it irked me to no end. I had advised him against taking that business decision and told him it should wait because we didn't have the resources to fund our dreams, but my husband had been adamant. He then expected me to understand when we stood the possibility of being evicted. I was so ashamed. What was he going to do when it didn't work out? Take a loan from my dad again? Anyway, my husband and I had a major quarrel over this, and it led to us not talking to each other for over 2 weeks. It was at this time the rumors at my office became rampant and most talked about. Apparently, HR had made a new hire for the role of chief editor. I had been eyeing that position ever since I had started working at the publishing company 4 years ago. I had somehow made it to the pod of one of the senior editors, but being the chief editor had been my goal. HR had them given the position to a new man, one that almost all the girls in the office found hot. At first, I hadn't gotten what all the speculation had been all about. I had been fighting with my husband, and our home was in dishevel, and the only thing on my mind was how I could fix it. I didn't have time to listen to the gossip mills at the office, but I eventually got sucked in. My husband hadn't touched me ever since I had confronted him about taking a loan from my dad, and he preferred to spend all his time in the office because he was angry with me all mao. He didn't know the idle mind made for a devil's workshop. We hadn't been having any go-tos in the bedroom, and I had begun hearing stories of some workers' adventures with the newly hired chief editor, and how his Johnson was hung and they couldn't wait to sleep with him again. However, it had quickly spread around the office that he didn't sleep with a woman more than once. It was one night and we were done for with the newly hired chief editor, and this had made the women that had managed to sleep with him mad as ever. It had been laughable at first when I hadn't fallen into the spell of obsessing over just how hung was my new boss's Johnson. Like I had said, I had matters at home to tend to and fix, and I did try to fix the problems I had with my husband. I had cooked him meals, did his laundry, basically did every minor act of service I could think of to show apology without actually apologizing because I hadn't done anything worth apologizing for. I loved my husband, but he hadn't done right with not paying our bills and then stacking them up and hiding them as if that would make it magically disappear. He wasn't 10. He was an adult, so he should have faced it instead of hiding. Anyway, I had tried to show my husband that I still supported his decisions even though we weren't talking. I had even gone to see him at the office with fresh clothes and a home-cooked meal. And you guys wouldn't believe what my husband had done. Can you believe that he told me to leave? Like he sent me away from his office. He had been in some meeting with 2 women and a man, and my husband had the audacity to send me away. I was so pissed because who did he think he is? I'd been trying to fix things for pushing him too far, and that was the thanks I got. Yeah, after that, I just didn't bother with it. Don't get me wrong. I loved my husband and didn't want to separate in a divorce, at least for the sake of our children. I had wanted it to work, but I was done putting effort. I could go play on the side. And besides, my husband wasn't giving me the attention he had always showered me with. I was turned into an attention-starved idiot, and my husband had been quick to dismiss me from his office. So while my husband had been signing office deals and ignoring his wife, even though I had tried to show remorse, I was getting latched somewhere else. The stories and speculations about my boss's tool at the office were something else. I didn't have to strain my ear because the gossip passed down like fresh wine at a party, and it quickly became addicting LOL. My friend Estella, who was also a co-editor, had been one of the few lucky people that had gotten to him, or so she had made me believe. Lying, backstabbing bitch. She had gushed on and on about how the S*X had been with the new chief, and how she couldn't stop her legs from shaking when she had been with him. She had also gushed on and on about how huge the tool was, and how it had taken her some maneuvering before they had been able to fit. I was jealous, of course, because someone I was better than was getting a piece of action from the hot and from the rumors, well-equipped new chief. Stella had told me she had seen him more than once. She always had a story to tell by the time Monday rolled in about her weekend shenanigans. It was so fun. This was how I got hooked on her stories. She was a master storyteller, even though she had just been a pro liar and I hadn't known. I was an editor. You would probably be wondering how I hadn't seen the whole manufactured script from Estella at the end. I wanted my own piece of action just like everyone else. I stopped wearing my wedding ring to work. Well, it's not as if I wore it to work before and only a few people had known that I was married. My friend had been one of those people. So I stopped putting the wedding band in my bag and just left it entirely. I had a price to catch. You can bet that anywhere there was talk about my boss's Johnson tool size, I was there. I was there fishing for information like it was the most knowledgeable thing on earth. I don't know how I had fallen so far. How had I become so obsessed? I would nod off at work, dreaming of it and how it would feel to finally see it after all the rumors and speculations. I would think about having a tumble in sheets with my boss while forgetting that I had been editing a manuscript. It became a very serious problem. I had almost slipped and talked about it at home while my husband and kids and I had been having dinner. My husband had asked me how work was going, and I almost said that there was a new hotshot at work. I would have guaranteed my marriage would have ended right then and there. Luckily, I had caught myself from slipping. Was I really lucky? If I had said it then, maybe things could have been different and my husband wouldn't have divorced me, right? That little slip hadn't made me stop in my obsession over my boss's tool. Everything seemed to make it worse. The talks, the rumors, my husband trying to make small talk with me back home and acting weird, then my close proximity with the said object of my obsession. My boss and I had started working closely together over a top author of our publishing company. I was the editor in charge of her latest novel. Her other one had gotten badly injured in an accident, So it was up to me, and my boss insisted that we work closely together to understand the author and produce the best book that will top the charts. I had no qualms about that. I loved the author, and I had wanted to give her the best of the best. But working closely with my boss had seemed to turn my obsession up a notch. I had even tried feeling it. I kid you not, and it was huge. I think that was what had made my boss take notice of me in the first place. This was how it had happened. I had been asked to bring in the first 2 chapters of the novel I had edited for the author, and my boss had ordered me to pour him a cup of coffee. I was a 5'5" sexy woman, so of course I had asked him to help me reach for the cups on the top cabinets. When he had loomed over me to help me get them, that was when I had subtly pushed my butt and felt his Johnson tool. It was huge, and I had apologized for the mistake, blaming it on trying to plug in the coffee maker well. My boss hadn't bought my lie, but had let me go at first. That was when he had noticed that I wanted to sleep with him. I had felt it, and I suddenly became obsessed with finding out just how big it was. Meanwhile, back at home, my husband had finally come back to his senses and saw that he couldn't do with him being in my bad books. Although he was always on one business trip or another, my husband always made sure I got a surprise. This was after he was tired of fighting with me, but he didn't know I had moved on to obsessing over my boss's Johnson size, and I had no intention of letting him find out. He didn't need to know, as what he didn't know would do him no harm. I began flirting with my boss while my husband had been doing everything on his corner to make sure I loved him again. I know I'm a terrible person. It's nothing new. But I didn't know it was going to come back to bite me in the butt. How could I go back to the loving wife and mother that was devoted to her children and husband again? Anyway, while my husband had been touring the world for his new business, I had no idea what it was. I was busy flourishing under the attention of my boss. We had coffee together because we had been working together. He took me out for dinner because we sometimes worked late, and I had called the babysitter to watch my kids when my boss hadn't been looking. My boss had made sure the ladies in the office knew I was the only person who could get a hold of him. I liked nothing more than an intentional man who staked his claim and made everyone know it. Maybe it was because I had given birth to children for my husband. That was why he no longer did things that made me feel hot or weak in my knees. My boss did all those things, and we hadn't even gotten to the sex part yet. After all the rumors I had heard about how it was to tumble in the sheets with my boss, I was sure I would fall in love with him immediately I saw the object of my fantasies. I was sounding poetic, and all in my thoughts back then. I hadn't known I was about to be wrecked and destroyed, not in a good way. And I had just been going along like a crazy fool. I learnt my lesson the hard way, though. I finally slept with my boss, and my husband had been out of town when I had done it. My obsession has led me to my doom. It was a late work night. I was hungry and tired from looking at words too much, and my boss had offered to get me food and massage the cranks in my neck. I wasn't going to say no to that, so I had wholeheartedly said yes. He got Chinese takeout, and when we had been done eating, he had cleared everything and massaged me. The massage became sensual, and all I could think about had been his hands on me. Well, it finally happened. We kissed, and every other thing became history. I got to see the size of it in person and not from rumors, and I could say the rumors hadn't done it justice. My boss and I slept together behind my husband's back, although my boss hadn't known I was married. But all good things must come to an end, and mine came to an end in an unexpected twist. I was caught by Estella. They had ganged up against me. Estella and my boss. They had been in the whole blackmail me thing. I had been so gullible. Here was how the beginning of my downfall came about. I had been sleeping with my boss and enjoying every moment of it. The next morning, Estella barged in on us with her phone camera in hand and a devilish smile on her face. I spotted the phone camera and was shocked. They had been waiting for the right moment before they would strike. I had ran away from the hotel to my house with my heart beating very fast in my chest. What was I going to do? Then the blackmail call began. At first, Estella had done it to you with me. She knew I was married and now had evidence that I had cheated on my husband. According to her, if I didn't want that evidence to see the light of day, I had to pay her $2,000. She had started small. I was sure she was just toying with me. I couldn't believe I had trusted this person as my friend. I paid the money because I didn't want my husband to find out that this was what I did while he was trying to make ends meet for the family. The amounts got bigger, and Estella and my boss got bolder with the threats to tell my husband that I was cheating on him. I was reaping the consequences of my actions, but as far as it didn't get to the point of reaching my husband, I was fine. I thought if I paid up the amounts Estella asked for, I wouldn't have to deal with my husband's wrath. Wishful thinking on my part. I had exhausted my savings and had to start borrowing money from my dad without my stepmother knowing, because if she knew, the whole of Connecticut was going to know. I borrowed money from my dad when Estella asked me that the price for her silence was 10,000 grand. I had to quit my job because I couldn't bear the shame of Estella and my boss seeing me at work. I didn't like it, but it was all I could do. My husband had asked me why I wasn't going to work again, and I lied and told him I just wanted to reassess my life. But I was hiding that very big secret from him, which he later found out. When I couldn't pay any of the blackmails anymore, my father had already begun asking me questions on what I was using the money I was borrowing from him for. I didn't even know how I was going to pay him back for the ones I had borrowed, yet I was borrowing more to keep the smell of shame and embarrassment from my door. Well, I couldn't afford to pay up Estella's demands anymore because I was broke. My savings had been used up. I didn't have anyone to turn to without it looking suspicious. So I had confronted Estella and told her I didn't have the money, and if she didn't stop, I was going to make her regret it. My family had good and bad connections all over Connecticut. Bad connections that you relied on to rough up some people you didn't like. I hadn't really thought about what I was doing. I was just tired of being backed up into a corner by her, and I thought if I pushed back and showed her I had an upper hand and I was done with her silly little games, she would stop. A terrible mistake. My husband had become more stable in the house and began working from home, now that his new business setup was complete. He showered me with love, and each passing day that Estella had blackmailed, I had felt guilty for what I had done, for becoming obsessed with someone that wasn't mine, when I had just the right person who would do anything for me. Honestly, I hadn't known what I was thinking. I messed up, and I was beginning to regret it. I thought 100 times over about telling my husband that I had cheated on him. I thought about the consequences it would have on my children, and I was scared that he would take them away from me, which he still did. Then I had been plain scared into silence. I had thought if he didn't know, then I could go on living peacefully with them. I could salvage it and everything, and my family would be back to the way it once was. I would love my husband with each breath I took and cherish my children with my entire being. I had it all under control. All it took was for my husband not to find out. If he hadn't found out, my whole life would have gone on smoothly. Now I was ruined, my career was ruined, everything was taken away from me, including my family. All because I had gotten obsessed over the size of my boss's tool. If I could turn back the freaking time. Estella didn't hide away for too long. She struck when I least expected it. I had just woken up from sleep, thinking it was another bright day to make amends in my heart when my husband bathed into our room and tossed away the cover and hauled me out of the bed, out of the room, and out of his house. I had just been wearing my nightrobe, so you should have all seen the stares I got from neighbors as they went about their morning business. My husband was furious with anger as he threw his phone towards me and demanded to know what was on it. I had been so confused and had scrolled through the contents with my eyes widening in shock. I had been caught. My husband had caught me. Estella had ratted me out. On the phone was a voice note and a picture, the picture she had taken of me and my boss in bed together. I played the voice note and realized that my whole life was entirely over. Estella explained to my husband how I had been obsessing over my boss's Johnson size at work, and how I had told her I would stop at nothing until I found out just how big it was. She even added a recording of me saying exactly that, but I had no idea she had been recording our conversation. She had planned everything from the beginning. It was all to make me look bad. I was shocked. In fact, shocked was an understatement to how I felt. My husband had screamed at me and began throwing my things out of the house while my children and the neighbors had stood watching what was going on. I had pleaded and begged my husband to calm down, hoping we could do this in a peaceful way and not in front of my children. My husband had just been screaming cheat, whore, terrible words in front of the children, and I had seen how scared they had been from their eyes. That was the last time I had such close proximity to my children before we got to court. I moved my things to my father's house, and my father was not so pleased with me. He demanded I pay him back the money I was owing him, and my stepmother was babbling to all and sundry about how I had cheated on my husband with my boss at the office. I had thought at least my father would have my back, but he wanted to throw me out if I didn't pay him back. My husband sent me divorce papers and requested for full custody of the children. That was how I had lost my children. I couldn't defend myself in court as I didn't have any money to hire a lawyer, and my father was not ready to help or even offer me assistance. He wanted me out of his house as I was only bringing him shame. I had lost my children, my savings, my husband, my family's support, my job, all within a matter of days. As if that hadn't been enough. After the divorce had settled, Estella had the audacity to ring me. However, she didn't ring me to gloat. She rang me to deliver terrible news. Apparently, the boss that I had been sleeping with had an STD and had shared it to half the women in the office that he had slept with. She was a victim just like me. Herpes. This was how I found out that I had genital herpes, all because of an obsession that could have been easily avoided. I cried when I found out, but I had the hope that all was going to be well. I had lost everything, and I had learnt my lesson. Update, 1 year later. Hi, Redditors. I thought after our settled divorce that my ex-husband was done with me. I had let him have the children. Why did he have to wait until the moment I was beginning to pick up my life to strike again? After the whole incident, I had stayed with my parents for about 6 months while working in a coffee shop close to our estate. I had worked my butt off, and while I was working, I was writing my own novel to sell and maybe gain back some money and bearing in my life. It had always been a dream of mine to write my own novel. LOL, my ex-husband said, not on my watch. After about 10 months of writing and editing, my novel was finally ready to be published. I had set up a book launch event for the novel and everything, and had done everything right. I just wanted to dust myself up and see that I could still do something worthwhile, but the consequences of my actions followed me till 1 year later. The day for my book launch arrived, and I had my fingers crossed that people would come. And a lot of people came. They had been trooping in like herds of sheep, but they hadn't been coming for me. Apparently, my ex-husband found out that I was to launch that day and released a short story. So while I was busy inviting people for my launch, he had been inviting people to come and witness my downfall. I hadn't even noticed that the tables were filled with his books until a slideshow started playing on the projector, and on it was the picture Estella had taken when she caught us cheating. My ex-husband had released a book to make sure nobody ever bought my book. There was nothing more cruel than ruining my dreams. Be careful who you trust in the world, because your friend can turn out to be your worst nightmare, and be careful what you obsess over. I learnt my lesson the hard way. I hope you don't end up the same way I did.